G'day there, it's Rachel here from Bush Edge Homesteading Australia, and today I thought we'd have a bit of a chat about preserving food by freezing it. And I use lots of different ways of preserving food. You've probably seen some of my other videos where there's canning and fermenting and dehydrating and things like that. But freezing is another way that we preserve a lot of our food. I thought what I'd do is just kind of give you a bit of a look into the freezer at the sort of things that we do to store food, and also just to see the sort of stuff that we have at this time of the year. So we raise sheep here on our property. We've only got 5 acres, so it's quite a small flock that we have. But each year we do put a sheep or two, and in fact this year it's going to be 3, into the freezer. And a lot of the food that we've got at the top here is actually some of the lamb from the last harvest that we did. So we butcher our lambs ourselves, and we do lots of different cuts when we do that. You can see here there's some mince that we've minced up. We also keep, we try and use everything. So this one here is some bones that we've got for stock. These ones are really good. The lamb rack roasts, they are an absolute favourite in our house. We've got a couple of those in there. And there's also a lot more down in the bottom, so lots of different cuts. You know, there's things like chops, there's mince, there's even koftas and things like that that I created on the day that we were doing our butchering. So lots of mince in the freezer still at the moment. We've probably gone through about half of the 2 sheep that we put in there for this year. We also love doing lots of smoking, and every time we use our smoker, we try and do a really big lot of smoked meat so that we can put it in the freezer like this here. So we recently did a brisket. So this is some beautiful smoked brisket that we've done. And we did a pork at the same time. And when we use our smoker, we've got an electric smoker. We like to pretty much run it full. And that way, you know, the electricity that you're using to its absolute maximum potential. And I think the last time we did this, we probably put about a dozen or so extra meals on top of what we ate on that day and the following day as well. So it's a really, really handy way of getting quick meals in your freezer as well. Because what we do is we actually take these packs and put it straight in the microwave as it is, vacuum sealed. And what happens is it actually pops, and that's how you know it's ready, when it actually pops the bag. It doesn't make a mess when it does that, but it just kind of pops, and hear a little bit of a popping sound. And when it does that, it's cooked, and not only is it cooked up and heated, but it is really super, super juicy because it cooks in its own juices in the bag. Well, not cooks, it's heating, isn't it? Because it's actually cooked already. And it's just super juicy, and we use this in a lot of different meals. You know, pulled pork we use in things like tacos. You can put it on top of like nachos and things like that, on the side of a salad. And in the wintertime, the brisket is absolutely beautiful, just with a bit of like mash or baked potato or something like that next to it as well. So that's a really handy way of getting some ready meals in the freezer for those nights where you just can't be bothered, you know, working too hard to cook a meal, and yet it's absolutely delish. On this side, I've got, what's that one? More of our pulled pork, so I could probably pop that one over there with that batch. We've also got fish. So a lot of my family is from over in South Australia, so that's where I'm originally from. And we go over and visit each year and go fishing. And each time we do that, we bring some fish home for the freezer. So that's some fish that we've got vacuum sealed and packaged up. Vacuum sealing is a great way of keeping your fish for a longer term. And each year we just kind of replenish that, and then we get to eat some beautiful fish throughout the year. More pork. So again, move that one over the other side there. Obviously you can see this is a unprepared for video today. Haven't sorted anything out, so this is literally as our freezer is. This one here is bread. So when the bread starts going stale, or if we've got the crusts, the kids, and to be honest, you know, we tend to not eat as well. We don't want to throw any of that out. We try and reduce waste as much as possible here. So what we do is actually pop that in the freezer in this bag here. And I use that for breadcrumbs. So in another video that I have, hopefully I've released it by the time this one goes live, what you'll see is that I actually use my solar dehydrator for dehydrating breadcrumbs. And this is the bread that we use for that, rather than buying breadcrumbs and having another product. You know, we're able to use this to reduce the waste stream. And I will say that making your own breadcrumbs just tastes so much better than what you can get from the shops anyway. So you can get the crumb size and things like that you like when you do it yourself. So that makes it a little bit different to that texture that you get from what's at the shops. And you can also use a better quality bread. So this is how we do breadcrumbs. And essentially all I do is just chuck bits of stale bread and any of those ends in here until I've got enough, and then I get the solar dehydrator starting and dehydrate myself up some breadcrumbs. Next, what do we got here? Stock scraps. So this is a really good concept if you haven't seen this before, of just having a Ziploc bag in your freezer and just throwing in any scraps that you have. At the moment, I've got not a lot in here because I actually made stock a couple of days ago. But what we normally do is if we have like chicken carcasses, or sometimes, you know, it might be pork bones from ham or something, and definitely all of our scraps from cutting up veggies. So it might be ends of carrots, the skins of garlic, and from onion and things like that. Any of those scraps, rather than throwing those fruit and veggie scraps out, I chuck them in here. And then I do a big boil up and I turn that into stock. In fact, let me go to my other freezer and I'll show you what that looks like. This one here is my other freezer. So this is the one that we have in the kitchen area. And in here, I've actually got a few lots of stock. There's also a few other goodies, things like frozen berries, because our blueberries are producing at the moment. Some leftover cherries, mangoes that we recently did. I also didn't use all of a tin of passion fruit from a PAV, so I kept half of that so it wouldn't go to waste. But this is what I'm looking for here. So this is one of my batches of stock that I've done. So this one here is just in one of the ball jars with one of the special freezing caps. So just keep that in mind. If you're using jars for freezing, you do need to have the right caps. If you use the wrong ones, and also if you don't take into account a little bit of headspace for expansion, you can actually crack your jars, so do be a bit careful with that. So that there is a chicken stock that I did with some barbecue chicken frames and also waste veggie scraps. And further down in here, if I get beyond some of the pre-packaged and purchased stuff, is my pork stock. So this one here, what I've done is actually frozen it in little muffin trays. And it equates to 1 cup blocks. So each one of these is 1 cup, and that's got a beautiful smoky flavour because that was some leftover smoked pork bones that we had that I used with some of those veggie scraps to create that one there. So that's a really handy idea if you want to try and minimise some waste and turn something that you know, could have gone into bin into something quite useful. And yes, you're probably noticing we don't do everything from scratch here. You know, that's just not life for us. The reality is we both work full time as well as kind of maintain the property, have all the kid commitments and stuff as well. So some nights we just need something quick and easy, and things like a bit of you know, fish that you can just throw in the air fryer or chips like that. That definitely can make life a little bit easier. Alrighty, so back to the main freezer. We've also just got things like some bones for the dog. I think we've got some crabs from a bit of a trip that we did doing a bit of crabbing. And also a jar of lemon juice as well in here. And again, kind of with the lids that allow for a bit of expansion there. Now, digging down a little bit further, I've got some kind of homemade ice creamy things that I've made for my son. Been having a few belly issues lately, so we've been trying to give him really super good food, but it is still hot here in summer, so we wanted something delicious and cooling, but also healthy for him. So these are just homemade ice creams made with a bit of oats, a Zimmel milk, which is like a good milk for your belly, and some blueberries and banana and a little bit of maple syrup, and he's absolutely loving those at the moment. So it's a nice, simple, easy recipe, and these little ice cream molds are wonderful for creating ice creams for the kids that actually look like ice creams, but they can be healthy. Now we do, again, don't mind a bit of, you know, stuff that is already made, and my oldest son loves these Buller ice creams, so we've got a few of those in there as well. And then we start getting down to more lamb. So given I've already talked about a lot of the cuts that we do, I'm not going to open all of that up, but you know, we've also got things like roasts in here, there's chops in here and all sorts of stuff. So let's move that out of the way and have a look at what else we've got in here. Here we go. We've got a big bag of, this one's apricots. So what I did with these is I got these from a local swap group. I can't remember exactly what I swapped for these now, but what I did was I brought them home because I knew I didn't have time to work with them. So I just chopped them all up, threw them in this Ziploc bag and stuck them in the freezer. And the idea is that I'm actually going to turn this into a bit of an apricot jam pretty soon. So that's already prepared and it'll be nice and quick and easy now on the day where I've got a bit more time to make jam. And that's just because sometimes you just don't have time to deal with the produce, and that's where your freezer can be really handy. Looking back down, we've got beef and we've got chicken and we've also got pork from the shops as well, that we've got from, you know, either the Woolies or the butchers. These ones here are animals that we don't raise for food on the property ourselves, so of course we buy that, as everyone else tends to do, and we like to keep as much of that in the deep freeze as we can, just so that we've always got stuff on hand whenever, you know, it's dinner time and you're like, what's for dinner? We're not that good at pre-planning meals here, so for us having a freezer like this is actually really handy because you can just go, hey, what's for dinner? Open the freezer and then work out what it is that you actually want to have for dinner. So we've got, what do we got? Bits of chicken mince and beef mince. There's, you know, chops and things like that in here as well, and chicken legs and thighs and stuff like that. In fact, that's a lot of what we've got down in this bottom bit as well. Now, if you haven't done this for your kids before, frozen juice boxes in the freezer are an absolute godsend in the summertime. Like, these things will keep a kid occupied for absolutely ages, and it cools them down on those really hot days as well. All we do is we just kind of cut the top of these packs off, and it turns into basically like a big ice block, and they just kind of hold onto the cardboard at the bottom. So that's why we've got a whole bunch of these in the freezer at the moment. So digging down a little bit further, a bit more pork down here as well. Bit of pre-packaged fish again. As I mentioned earlier, it's handy to have this sort of stuff just to be able to chuck it into the freezer, into the air fryer, and have a nice quick and easy dinner on those nights, but especially where you've got kid commitments. And that's similar with this pack down here, which is just some chicken. Actually, this brand here, if you haven't seen it, is absolutely awesome. This stuff tastes like KFC sort of style chicken. So if you like KFC, this is something you can pop in the air fryer yourself and just have a quick and easy meal. So again, a bit of convenience food there. And then getting down into the bottom, I've got some berries. And these are a whole bunch of blackberries. We have been harvesting blackberries galore recently. And again, sometimes you just don't have time to process it all, you know, whether you want to dehydrate it or can it or whatnot. And to be honest, sometimes you also want to have some berries in their whole form for that time of the year, you know, where you might want to do pies or something like that in the wintertime. And just freezing them up is a good way of having them on hand at that time of the year. So all I've done here is just got a whole bunch of blackberries, pop them in this container, and then I've popped it in the freezer. You know, quick, convenient, easy, and I'll have berries when I need them when winter rolls around and they're no longer there to harvest. Now, right in the bottom, we have a duck. So this was actually one of our ducks that we raised, and popped that in the freezer. Jeepers, it was probably about 5 or 6 months ago now. So it's probably a good thing I'm digging down into the bottom of the freezer, because we'd kind of forgotten that one was down there. So that's planned for a bit of a roast duck meal. And that was one of our Indian runner males. We had a couple of males. This one was a little bit snappy towards one of our other ducks, and in fact it tried to snap the neck of our little baby duck that we'd hand raised as it was growing older, and we were trying to introduce it into the flock. So baby duck was introduced into the flock, and this large male made it into the freezer instead. So it's just kind of sometimes the realities of things on the homestead. You know, in nature, I guess animals would kind of work it out and there would be a bit of a balance. Sometimes, you know, with things like the ducks and the quails, if you don't have your ratios of males right, you know, sometimes you need to fix that. And with that comes a delicious meal for us in some nice roast duck soon. So anyway, that's kind of a bit of an insight into the sort of stuff that we have in our freezer at the moment. Hopefully you kind of found that interesting, and hopefully it gives you some ideas as well, just for preserving things yourself, and, you know, for making some homemade things like, you know, ice creams and stuff like that. You know, and also just, you know, acknowledging that not everyone can do everything from scratch. The reality is that shortcuts, things like, you know, your convenience foods and drinks like we see here, you know, just because you're homesteading doesn't mean you can't do that sort of stuff. But a deep freeze is definitely a great tool for you if you are trying to store food. And it's also great for storing those convenience foods as well. So anyway, that's enough of my ramblings for today. Hopefully you enjoyed that. And if you haven't seen any of our other videos, why not have a bit of a look, and hopefully you can see some of those other methods of food preservation that I use as well. Thanks for joining today, and catch you later.